my judge ready? Is my opponent ready? As a brief off-time roadmap, I'll be going negation and then affirmation. I stand in firm negation of the resolution that has been stated, and I agree with my opponent's definitions. The value used in this round will be governmental legitimacy, which is defined as the belief that a rule, institution, or leader has the right to govern. It is judgment by an individual about the rightfulness of a hierarchy between rule or ruler and its subjects, and about the subordinate's obligation toward the rule or ruler. When shared by many individuals, legitimacy produces distinctive collective effects in society, including making collective social order more efficient, more consensual, and perhaps more just. Tom Taylor says that if authorities are not viewed as legitimate, social regulation is more difficult and costly. Tyler, 2001. Governmental legitimacy allows for a country to govern and protect their citizens. By having governmental legitimacy, the people have the right to dissolve their government if they are not providing for themselves. The violation of governmental legitimacy leads to impacts such as chaos in countries that violate their citizens' human rights. In context of this resolution, a government must provide rights for their citizens in the most efficient and equal way possible. Therefore, since the right to be forgotten cannot achieve these two vital things, a government should not be obligated to provide it as a civil right. The criterion to uphold governmental legitimacy will be Locke's social contract. John Locke goes on to explain, we give up our right to ourselves exact retribution for crimes in return for impartial justice backed by overwhelming force. We retain the right to life and liberty and gain the right to just impartial protection of our property. If a ruler seeks absolute power, if he acts both as judge and participant in disputes, he puts himself in a state of war with his subjects, and we have the right and duty to kill such rulers and their servants. The government only has certain limits on their citizens. In short, a government must provide for the best action that their constituents want, or the constituents have the right to dissolve that government. In context of this resolution, by providing the right to be forgotten as a regular right and not a civil right, a government can better implement it, therefore provide protection of the right and equal distribution of the right, instead of promoting it as a civil right but not being able to equally distribute it. Locke's social contract provides for a government that responds and adheres to the rights of the people, which in turn provides the legitimacy of a government. Contention 1. The inefficiency of protecting the right to be forgotten causes it to be difficult to uphold as a civil right. Therein lies the first problem for these supporting a right to be forgotten, which in reality does not forget anything. It only exaggerates the existing differences between those who do not know where to find the information and look for it directly, and those who do not and therefore need a search engine. Burton. The Court of Justice leave it to the private companies that manage the search engines to decide what they are able to encounter in the digital world. Burton, 2014. What's more, it puts company in the nearly impossible position of deciding what information meets this vague threshold. The individuals with motivation and resources to pursue complaints are likely to be those political and business elites about whom the public interest should demand unfettered search results, and companies will face pressure to remove whatever is asked of them rather than face the legal cost of challenging illegitimate requests. Stephens, 2014. There is no efficient way to actually provide the right to be forgotten, therefore even if it was a civil right, not everyone would have the right to have it, and that goes against the very definition of civil rights, which is to lower discrimination and inequality. By having the right to be forgotten be just a regular right versus a civil right, the general public still has the opportunity to take advantage of the right, but the government isn't forced to provide a right that they cannot efficiently implement. Under many government constitutions and the UN Declaration of Human Rights, a government is illegitimate if they cannot provide all the civil rights. Therefore, by forcing a government to implement a civil right that cannot be reached in its entirety, it causes most governments to become illegitimate and leads to chaos on an international scale. Contention 2. The right to be forgotten violates transparency. Removing or de-identifying information runs contrary to the rights of citizens to access information and is contrary to transparency. Transparency is something we demand from our government, our NGOs, and our institutions. This is creating information gaps. This is a false court ruling on a false right. Garside, 2014. Privacy is a universal right that must be protected, but this overreaching judgment is far more likely to aid the powerful in attempts to rewrite history than affords individuals more influence over their online identity. Stephens, 2014. Transparency is a vital part to a legitimate government because it requires governments to respond to citizens and then allow citizens to know what the government is doing. Transparency is used to lessen the risk of dictators or absolute power where the citizens are not taken care of. Under Locke's social contract, citizens have the right to dissolve a government if it is not providing what is needed to them or respecting their rights. By limiting transparency, citizens cannot properly evaluate their governments. Therefore, they don't know if they are actually providing for them, which in turn makes them an illegitimate government. This leads to impacts of having an abusive or authoritarian government that is unresponsive to their citizens, which then leads to an impact of a government that violates human rights and disregards quality of life of their citizens. By providing the right to be forgotten as civil rights, it opens the door for the powerful and elite to be able to delete information that might be vital to citizens. And for these reasons, I urge a vote in the negation. I'll be moving on to the affirmation Let's look at the value of the affirmation, which is quality of life. Like I stated in cross-examination, a government is the one that actually maintains quality of life, and a government is the one that actually gives quality of life to their citizens. So we actually have to look at a legitimate government before we can actually even look at quality of life, because the government is the person that actually maintains the quality of life of their citizens. Onto the value criterion of personal value success system. We actually still provide for this value criterion just because of the fact that even in the status quo as of now, you can still delete things on the internet. As a regular right, you still have the opportunity to delete anything, but we don't provide as a civil right because it's not equal distribution to everyone. On to his first point of violates personal autonomy. Like I stated before, you can still delete what is still there. Status quo at the present moment still has the right to be forgotten. It's just not a civil right because you cannot implement it equally, because people that know how to actually exercise the right to be forgotten will be able to exercise it more efficiently versus someone that cannot. And if we look at his impact of national security, he does not have a 100% success rate in actually flagging national security risks, which means that the margin of error could be detrimental to a nation, which means that if a website was not flagged as a national security risk and then deleted, that risks the whole nation that might have a bigger impact than his national security impact on his first point. On to the second point that leads to more motivated employees. We can't even look at his two factors because of the fact that he has no direct link for hygiene, which is the first factor, to the right to be forgotten. He stated in his speech that the only way for it to actually work if we can account for two high levels of those two factors. But since he has no link to his first factor, his two-factor system won't actually work, which means that the right to be forgotten will not lead to more motivated employees, which is his impact, which means that his impact completely falls. And for these reasons, I do urge a vote in the negation, and I'm open to cross-examination whenever my opponent is.